Welcome back. You're watching Chartbusters. Now it's time to focus on a couple of corporates. Well, Nirmal Bang Institutional Equities has come out with a report with a couple of top recommendations, top stock ideas from the engineering and construction space. KEC International is one of these companies. In fact, we'll just put out that list for you, some of the other stocks that are part of Nirmal Bang's sort of set of recommendations as well. Crumpton, for instance, Dixon Tech. These are some of the other names on that list. We do have one of the managements, as I said, KEC International, Vimal Kejriwal, MD and CEO of the company, is now joining us to give us a sense of how business is playing out. Mr. Kejriwal, actually just a couple of minutes ago, we were having a larger discussion on infrastructure and power with Feedback Infra. What is your sense of business as this year is coming to an end and as we're entering the next year with elections around the corner? How do you see orders shaping up?
So overall, we had a good year on the infra side in the ordering, basically T&D and railways and little bit of civil. Although on the T&D side, we saw a slight slowdown from the state boards, which was in a way compensated, at least for us, from power grid. Of late, obviously, with the election mood coming in, we are now seeing a sort of a slowdown where tenders are not coming in, or we don't expect decisions in the next 2 months. So going forward, there would definitely be a slowdown in the India piece.
Okay, so what would India revenues look like in FY20, Mr. Kejriwal, if in the first 3 months of this financial year, we're not going to see too much by way of ordering? What impact will it have on your overall growth numbers?
No, it will not have any impact. In fact, for the next year, we have been talking about a 15 to 20% growth as against a 12.5 to 15 for this year, because we already have a large order book, almost 20,500 crores. And I think the slowdown which we saw was more primarily in the SEB side on the T&D, but we are also very large on railway. So I don't think we are going to have a slowdown in the domestic. In fact, we are expecting a growth in the domestic industry.
Now, those are trends for FY20. Sir, if I could just rewind back and talk about this year as we're closing out. You had pruned your guidance. That was because of some sluggishness in the international business. I think the top line guidance was about 12 to 15%. Is that in place still? And is there any improvement in some of those international orders now?
So, Survi, we had given a guidance of 15%, which we slightly brought it down to 12.5 to 15%, because we were facing a couple of issues. One was we faced some issues on the domestic front with one of our private customers, where we had to slow down the execution. And the second one was a large West African order, where because of, I'll say, resettlement issues, the lenders had asked us to go slow, which have now been resolved. So hopefully we should end up around 12.5% for the year. As far as international is concerned, last 2 or 3 years we have seen a sluggish growth, but this year our international order book has shot up. So next year we do expect that, if you look at just pure T&D, between international and domestic, the ratios would be 70% international, 30% domestic, which used to be the way we were operating quite a few years back.
You'd also spoken about some payment delays from your private players. How is the situation right now, and what have you managed to collect by way of advances in this quarter so far?
So the payment delay, there was a payment delay, and accordingly we have slowed down the work, but I think things are happening, and we expect that to get resolved in the next 10-15 days is the assurance which we have. As far as payments are concerned, we had some backlog in Saudi. Now we already received almost 380 crores since the close of the quarter. So we are quite happy, and since we had large orders coming from the international market, I think quite a few advances are now coming anytime. So I think our working capital will significantly improve.
I was just going to ask you that question. If you could give us some numbers, Mr. Kejriwal, what is the likely improvement in the working capital cycle that we can see? Is it going to be in Q4 itself, or maybe more in Q1 next year?
I think let's talk about the Q4. If you look at the 9 months, we had interest cost of around 3.2% of revenues, which we expect to improve to 2.7 for the year, which means that for Q4 we should be below 2.5, 2.4 or something. That's number one as interest cost. The borrowings, we had around 3,100 crores as on 31st December, which we are targeting to go down to around 2,500 crores based on the Saudi money coming in, the advances, and generally we have seen that in the month of March, especially the government customers, etc., tend to pay off to complete the budgeted allocation. So our view is that by 31st March, our borrowing should come down by from 31 to 2,500, and interest cost for the year should come down to 2.7.
Okay, so your net debt to come down from 3,070 to 2,500 crore rupees.
Yeah.
What about your net working capital days? That was at 145 days as of 9 months. What's the closing number on that?
So closing number, we are expecting the net working capital to be somewhere around 125 to 130 days. I think one thing which I want to add is that we also completed we had a small BOT asset that sale has been completed this month. So those cash and the borrowings have gone off our books.
Okay, finally, Mr. Kejriwal, as you mentioned, the international business is now really picking up on the T&D side, and you gave us that 70-30 mix as well, which sounds healthy. What about railways? What's happening there? And in FY20, how much of your business is going to come from the Indian railways? And what does that mean for your margin? Are railway orders in sync with overall companies' margins?
So as far as the revenues are concerned, last year we did around 800. This year we should do around 1,800 to 1,900 crores of revenue in railways, which is more than double. And next year we should see around a 20-25% growth in the railway revenues. That's the way we are looking at it. We have an order book of almost 4,700 crores today in railways, plus a reasonable amount of L1s. So I think we'll end the year with around 4,500 or 5,000 crore of order book. So I think we are quite happy. The margins are slightly lower than the T&D business, but I think with the volumes going up, they are inching up toward the T&D.
Mr. Kejriwal, thank you very much for joining in to KEC International. A lot of optimistic statements coming in to FY20 revenue growth seen at 15 to 20%, net debt to come down to 2,500 crores. There should be an improvement in the working capital days as well. The stock has moved up a tad bit. But let's move on and talk about Kotak Mahindra Bank, because that's a stock which is under pressure and tremendous pressure.